Director Brennan. There is no doubt that this is significant. There was a expert who called this the most dramatic achievement for Israel since October 6th, militarily, and for the Israeli people. We see the folks who are out there in Tel Aviv, many of them holding signs now calling for a ceasefire deal. Put this in the big picture for us in the Middle East. What does this mean?
Well, it is a major milestone for the Israelis. Over the past year, they have destroyed a lot of Hamas's war-making capability, terrorist-making capability, and has taken off the battlefield senior Hamas operatives. But they needed to get the architect of the October 7th attacks, but also the person who is in control of Hamas's war-making capabilities inside of Gaza. He also is the head of their political bureau. So this is a very important step that they've taken, but they need to be able to demonstrate to the Israeli people, I think, and to the world, that now they're going to be able to move forward with the path that seeks to bring the bloodshed to a halt. See whether or not this is an opening that Prime Minister Netanyahu can say, we've achieved almost all of our objectives in terms of destroying Hamas's capabilities. Now we need to find out a way forward. I'm hoping that's going to happen. We'll have to see, because also it's so dependent on a ceasefire to get the hostages out. And we have been stuck on that. And Yahya Sinwar was a major obstacle to it. He was refusing to negotiate in some of these engagements. And so therefore, I think we do have the possibility of some, openings here in the future.
A major, obviously, contributor to any or detriment to any possible ceasefire deal. But what about Benjamin Netanyahu? What do you think his next move is? What would you expect to hear from him, perhaps in the next hour or two?
Well, I think he's certainly going to applaud the work of the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, in terms of the work that they have done there and the importance of taking Yahya Sinwar off of that battlefield. I like to think that he's also going to appeal to the Palestinian people, because Yahya Sinwar also was a very brutal and ruthless executioner of Palestinians in Gaza who were working with the Israelis. He had this reputation of doing these very, strong torture sessions and executing individuals if they were found to be helping the Israelis in any way. So he was an obstacle, not just over the past year in terms of hostage negotiations and ceasefire, but he's been an obstacle over the course of many years to see whether or not Israel and the Palestinian people in Gaza could, in fact, find some way to move forward together in peace.
David, to pick up on what the director was saying, your paper reminds us today that back in 1989, when Yahya Sinwar was the internal enforcer for Hamas, he was being interrogated about his murders, and they included forcing a Hamas fighter to bury his own brother alive. Fast forward to just this week, we heard from the parents of Hersh Goldberg Polin that he was on his knees when he was shot, trying to shield himself with his one hand. Talk about that level of ruthlessness and where it comes from.
So Yahya Sinwar's level of violence reminds me of the Islamic State, almost a theater of cruelty in the way that he punished Palestinian enemies. He buried one alive, reportedly, as you just said. He said to have dropped boiling oil on others. He was interrogating. He was a harsh, cruel man. And I think that's one reason that his death is such an important symbolic moment of victory for Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu will soon be on television saying, we have done what we promised. The architect of October 7 has been killed. Whether beyond the symbolism this really means an end or the beginning of the end of the war in Gaza, we just can't say. We don't know how Hamas or the people of Gaza will respond. We don't know how Iran will respond. Yahya Sinwar was their key proxy. He was communicating with Iran. We now know about his hopes for overturning Israel. So I think there are many, many questions ahead, but he was an extraordinary leader. This is a symbolic victory, but it was also really important tactically. He ran this war. He conducted a masterful campaign of deceit to hide the intentions of Hamas for several years before October 7, pretending that Hamas had peaceful intentions and tricking the Israeli intelligence services, arguably among the best in the world into believing that Hamas didn't want war right up to the hours before Hamas broke through the fence from Gaza. So, today is a huge day, but there's so many questions that I'm going to be watching. I think the whole world will be.
Obviously, the intelligence services and Benjamin Netanyahu himself, director, took an enormous hit after October 7th. And we were speaking before we went on the air here about what you have seen as somebody who's the former CIA director from Israeli intelligence from then until now, more than a year later. What is the status, as you see it now, that might be different of Israeli intelligence?
Well, clearly there was an abysmal intelligence failure that led to the October 7th attacks. And over the past year, I think the Israeli intelligence really has enhanced their collection capabilities and their efforts to try to get better sense of where a lot of these senior leaders are. We saw what happened in Lebanon against Hezbollah in terms of being able to identify where Nasrallah was, as well as this very sophisticated operation in terms of the pagers that exploded. But also in Gaza, I think the Israelis have found that, all that tunnel network in Gaza has really been quite challenging and difficult. But I must say the Israeli intelligence services, that includes, Shin Bet, which is domestic, Mossad, which is the foreign, and the Israeli Defense Forces intelligence as well, I think they have shown tremendous capability to bring their capabilities together and to be able to target those individuals as well as those capabilities that pose the most significant threat to the state of Israel.
Then does it surprise you that, first of all, this was part of a routine operation, and second of all, that Sinwar was above ground anyway? In the first place, as I think Richard Engel described it, reduced to behaving more like a foot soldier.
Yeah, well, I think as David alluded to, Yahya Sinwar was a masterful leader in many respects in terms of orchestrating the Hamas members. But also he was very, very sophisticated, and he understood the Israelis. And I think he was trying to hide almost in plain sight as far as working with the other Hamas, militants that were on the ground, while the Israelis were pursuing all these different tunnels in this very vast network underground. So the fact that he was able to stay alive for the past year, I think, demonstrates just how crafty and clever he has been. But obviously, time ran out on him. And again, it seems to be just an operation that happened. But also, it's not like the Osama bin Laden operation that took years and years of planning and tedious intelligence collection to get. But I think the symbolism and the impact of Yahya Sinwar's departure is similar to what happened when Osama bin Laden was killed. You've taken away the architect of such a heinous attack against the United States and Israel. And therefore, the organization itself is going to be in a bit of disarray in terms of who is now going to assume the mantle of leadership. There are a lot of extremists within the Hamas organization, and we'll have to see how this sorts itself out. And this is where I think the Israeli intelligence is going to have to continue to do its work in Gaza to find out those individuals and how Hamas, the organization, is going to be reacting to this death.
Let me ask you about post-death intelligence information gathering. And I should say that we have confirmed, my colleague Andrea Mitchell has confirmed, that from a senior Israeli official in Tel Aviv, that IDF did confirm his death from fingerprints on the body. Obviously, we've talked about the fact over the last several hours that Sinwar was in an Israeli prison and they had a lot of information on him. But there had been previous reports that he had died, and they obviously turned out not to be true. Would you imagine by now they may have multiple points of information to tell them this is Sinwar? They wouldn't say that it was Sinwar if they weren't sure of it. And what are they doing now after collecting his body?
Well, the physical resemblance, I think, was the initial tip-off that, in fact, it might have killed Sinwar. And that's why they said they needed to have the confirmation with DNA. And since Sinwar was in Israeli prison for many years, they have a lot of DNA. And with the body, then, it's not just a fingerprint, it's actual DNA that they can test and have conclusive. And, be very confident that this was, in fact, Sinwar. But now, again, what they're going to do with the body, I think the Israelis are going to try to respect the Islamic customs, whether or not they're going to reach back to Sinwar's family or somehow, but I'm sure they're going to take care of the body in the appropriate way. Now that they have the confirmation again through DNA, I don't think there's any more proof that they need that Sinwar is actually dead.